Bloomberg now learning sources telling us that President Trump is expected to sign the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. This, of course, would put the Hong Kong special trading status under review every year. The House just passed the bill, which was already unanimously passed by the Senate.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that Beijing has already said that they've been displeased with that they've potentially threatened retaliation without specifying what that would take in the form of, but certainly saying that it sees Washington as meddling in Hong Kong affairs and that it shouldn't. Let's cross over to Washington for some reaction. Our State Department reporter Nick Wadhams joins us now. Nick, obviously you've covered China at length, and now in your current beat, you're looking at the state of affairs from the other side. I mean, how difficult is it for President Trump, given that this bill had bipartisan support, but also he's at a stage that is very critical and sensitive for getting this trade deal signed?
Right. Well, the president really has very little choice here because the Hong Kong bill was passed in both houses with essentially a veto-proof majority. So even if he comes out and tries to block it, the House and Senate have made clear that they will then pass it through again, and he'll essentially have no choice, so it would come off looking like a defeat for him. I mean, this is just a recognition of reality for the president. There is very, very strong feeling in both houses of Congress about Hong Kong and a real desire to push back against China more broadly. If you look at it from an even higher elevation, there has been a strong strategic shift in the United States where lawmakers and the State Department and senior officials are much more willing to push back against what they see as China's increased global ambitions and concerns over what it's doing with Huawei and obviously with trade. That's the genesis of the president's own trade war with China. What effect this will have on the trade deal is the big question. So you look ahead. Certainly China seems to be suggesting some link between the Hong Kong bill and the possibility that that could complicate trade talks. So that's what we'll be looking to next.
But Nick, one thing is enacting this bill into law. What's the possibility of the U.S. government actually going ahead and making use of this force?
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, the president always has some discretion to do what he feels he needs to do. These bills often have written into them national security waivers where the president is allowed essentially to say that he can ignore some of its most stringent provisions if he feels that that's in the interests of U.S. national security and in his own interests. So, you know, one way to look at this is that the president could actually use this as additional leverage with China as he continues those trade talks. So he could say to them, hey, listen, I have this weapon in my corner, essentially, that I'm willing to use against China and against Hong Kong. Let's settle these trade talks now, and I will make some sort of guarantee that I would not do that. Of course, the question is, China so far has shown it's not particularly interested or doesn't take very kindly to those threats. Obviously, they've come out very strongly against the bill. So again, another situation where you have further escalation between the U.S. and China, and we don't seem to be anywhere closer really to finding an off-ramp to de-escalate those tensions and wrap up the trade talks.